Yuma-san, we are hoping to see you cosplay Nezuko at Anime Expo 2025. Hello there, my fandom friends. I am coming to you after having gone to Anime Expo 2024. Now, I wanted to quickly explain something before I get into the video. So after AX, I actually lost my voice due to kind of what I'm gonna be talking about in this video. And then I ended up getting like really sick for 2 weeks. And I'm actually deaf in this ear as of right now due to the sickness. And so I can't really hear my own voice too well. I'm gonna try to edit this video as well as possible. My voice isn't 100% healed, so please give me grace in the whole video making process, but I did want to continue making videos, especially about the whole experience of AX. So this video is going to cover in very high detail the Demon Slayer panel at Anime Expo 2024. This was held in the main panel room at Anime Expo, or AX is what I'll call it in this video, on July 6th at 4 p.m. And so in this video, I'm going to be basically just breaking down all of the questions that the voice actors were asked, everything that they talked about on stage. It was about an hour and 15 to 20-ish minutes long, and so I will be breaking it down. Something else I wanted to mention is that for these Japanese panels, no pictures or videos are allowed, and so I do not have any kind of content like that to share. Out of respect, of course, for the Japanese culture. They had lots of security this year going through making sure people didn't do it. Of course, some people still sneak it and post it, which is obviously not the right call because then these Japanese people are not going to come back to AX. And so I also wanted to just kind of say, please do not be posting things if you got things, because we want these people to enjoy their time here and feel comfortable and feel the need to come back due to all of our excitement and energy for the stories that they are a part of. And so I apologize if it's boring to not see any videos or pictures from it, but I hope you understand it's from the point of being respectful to the Japanese culture. So I'm just gonna start off with a breakdown of exactly what happened. So we're going to be jumping right into this. The panel started off with, of course, the huge screens showing off the theme song for the Hashira training arc. Of course, the audience was going absolutely insane. The cheers for Gyu especially, like, blew me away. Like, I know Gyu is a loved character. He's personally my second favorite Hashira, so you can better believe I was screaming on the top of my lungs for Gyu. But like, the people behind us, like, I don't know how some people have these lungs, because I could never scream this high. I mean, I lost my voice due to this panel and due to the MHA panel, which will be a different video that I talk about. But oh my gosh, it was just amazing seeing all of the people in the audience so excited for Demon Slayer. And I went with a group of my friends, of course. Me and my boyfriend were about 5 rows back from the front, and then 3 of my other friends were about like 3-ish rows back. So we were pretty close to the front, which was super exciting. And so for this panel, they had 2 voice actors from Japan, and they also had the producer of Demon Slayer. So the producer of Demon Slayer is Yuma Takahashi. This was actually my 3rd time seeing him. And then they had Natsuki Hanai, which is the voice of Tanjiro. And then they had Takahiro Sakurai, which is the voice of Gyu. Now, please forgive me if I'm saying these names wrong. I know the Gyu's voice actor especially, I know I'm saying the other 2 correctly, but please forgive me, I'm trying my best with this Japanese. The kind of moderator or host of this panel asked these 3 men to introduce themselves. Of course, Hanai, instead of introducing himself, he just went straight into a breathing form, which was so cute, and then he introduced himself as the voice of Tanjiro in English. He's the sweetest. This was also my 3rd time seeing him. He proceeded to thank the audience and thank America for having him at this panel. And then he took a little inspiration, I think, from the MHA panel. And what he did was very similar to Daiki, the voice of Deku, which I'll talk about in my MHA panel breakdown. But what he did was he yelled "Demon," and then the audience would yell "Slayer," and we did that like so many times back and forth. He was just trying to pump up the audience and it was really fun. Sakurai, the voice of Giyu, then introduced himself actually after he did a water breathing style. So again, that was really cool hearing Giyu. The audience was just absolutely screaming their hearts out for both of these voice actors. Yuma Takahashi was of course next, the producer of Demon Slayer. He introduced himself. He's very fluent in English. All 3 times that I've seen him, he's been very well spoken in the English language. So props to him for knowing both languages so well. And he had a couple questions actually for the audience. He asked us if we enjoyed the Hashira training arc, which of course the audience was well obliged to answer him. And then he also announced that the Infinity Castle is going to be movie trilogies coming out sometime in the future, and he asked if we were excited for that. So again, old news that we had already known, but he was just pumping the audience up more and more, which was so fun. They then moved into asking the 3 how it felt to be at AX. They kind of talked about how Hanai-san and Yuma Takahashi are veterans for AX now. This year was Hanai-san's 3rd year at AX, and so he was talking about how he's just so happy to be here again, how he wants to come back in the future, and how it feels like home. Sakurai explained that this was his 1st year at AX. In the beginning, I could totally tell he was pretty overwhelmed with just the power of the audience. The American audience never fails to just bring all their energy and passion to these conventions and their love for these fandoms. And so he talked a lot about that during the panel throughout the whole thing, about how like he wasn't expecting that and how much he enjoyed feeling so much praise for his character and for this Demon Slayer story that he's a part of. Then it was Yuma's turn, and he was explaining how this was his 5th year at AX. And he had started in 2019 when Demon Slayer actually started airing. And so this was really cool that he got to celebrate the 5th year anniversary here at AX, and for the past 5 years for this Demon Slayer story that he has brought to the screen. Now here and throughout the whole panel, he actually talked a lot about Gotoge, which is the author of Demon Slayer. He kept referring to them as sensei, or in English meaning like teacher, or person that you're looking up to, like a mentor. And he explained how he's trying to make the manga into the best anime possible, the best adaptation that he can. And he is trying to do all that he can to make the audience happy and to continue working really hard so that the people that come to these panels are still filled with excitement for years to come. They then moved into more direct questions about the Demon Slayer story. So since it is the 5th year anniversary for Demon Slayer this year, we actually backtracked all the way back to episode 1 of Demon Slayer, Cruelty. They actually played a little scene of Tanjiro and Giyu, but we'll get there. But the first question that was asked to them about this kind of topic was basically, what are your general thoughts about looking back on Cruelty episode 1. Hanai-san started like he did for most all of the questions throughout the panel, and he stated that he remembered it well, and that when they first started there weren't many cast members, and so it was a very different environment back then. And so he remembered telling himself that yes, he could get through it just like Tanjiro is getting through so much that's been thrown at him in the beginning of the story. Sakurai then spoke about how he remembered watching Hanai-san and the voice of Nezuko absolutely give it their all in this first episode during their recording, and even though he was nervous, they were kind of the inspiration that stimulated him to move forward and also do his best. Yuma then recalled how he enjoyed seeing Tanjiro's kindness and strength together in this very first episode, compared to everything that we've seen from Tanjiro this far throughout the whole story, just comparing it back to the very first episode, seeing his strength and power even from back then. This is when they played the scene from Cruelty where Giyu is actually yelling at Tanjiro this whole big speech, and Tanjiro is in the snow crying. Now this got a kick out of the audience because of course it was so cool recapping back to episode 1. And then they asked the three men kind of what they remember about this experience when they were recording for that specific scene. Hana explained that in the beginning, of course, Tanjiro as a character is feeling this despair in this situation. There's not really much that he can do. And so he's devastated. He can't do much. And so Hana really tapped into the feelings of Tanjiro as a character and went through there and showed all of that sadness that was very intentional for Tanjiro as a character. Sakurai explained how he really honed in and focused on that first line of Giyu's really harsh but powerful speech to Tanjiro, and then really honed in on that to make it extra powerful to kind of solidify Giyu as a character and then move forward from there. He said he was very conscious of what Giyu was dealing with on his internal monologue and his internal thoughts, and how maybe that was also influencing the conversation, why Giyu was such in a rage during the scene over what Tanjiro was doing. They then moved into talking more about the Hashira training arc throughout the rest of the panel, but I really loved how they dedicated the first like 10 to 15 minutes talking about the 5-year anniversary and getting to know a little bit more about these men, just to really kind of celebrate the joys of Demon Slayer over the past 5 years. And so then they kind of just talked to them about what their kind of initial reactions were to the Hashira training arc. Hana, of course, had to be a little goofy guy, and he just immediately said Guillaume's iconic line. Then explained how much he loves seeing Guillaume more on the screen during this season. Which, yes, me too, more Guillaume was amazing. Sakurai explained how he really loved delving more into Giyu's past trauma and how he's excited to see Giyu grow from here. Yuma talked about how him and his whole crew really worked hard on putting as many details as they could from the original source of the manga from Gotoge, and how they're going to continue respecting their sensei's work in the future. And he also expressed how excited he was to hear all of the audience happy voices and cheers in the beginning, which again was a common occurrence throughout the panel. Honestly, all of these Japanese panels, they just love America's excitement for their stories. They then moved into talking about the very first scene, the anime original scene of Obanai and Sodomy from the very first episode of Hashira Training, and they actually played that on the screens behind them, a couple minutes of that, not the whole thing. But then they asked them kind of what their initial thoughts were about seeing this scene. Now, Hanai-san, if you don't know, is a huge fan of the manga. He has read through the whole series, and he's just a fan just like you or I. And so he was very adamant about explaining how this was an anime original scene and how he loved seeing Sodomy and Obanai's breathing styles so much more sooner than when we originally would have gotten them a little bit later in the Hashira training. Sakurai explained actually a little bit behind the scenes of the voices of Sodomy and Obanai and how much they thoroughly enjoyed recording for this scene. And then he talked a little about how he thought it was a really good idea to show the Infinity Castle now at the beginning of the season, and how he just thought it looked so cool. Yuma explained how this scene was very intentional because he wanted to show off Obanai and Sodomy's breathing styles and their strengths in kind of this fighting style that was very much like a battle versus just training, and he thought it was a good ground and like standards to set before we got into the season, especially since we hadn't seen a lot of them prior. They quickly recapped the first episode, past the scene of Obanai and Sodomy, and of course went into the amazing episode, Giyu Tomioka's pain which they talked a lot about his little scene with Tanjiro, and then of course their whole conversation, which I will get to later, which they talked about of course, but initially they just wanted to hear their thoughts about this episode as a whole. Hanai was explaining how he really wanted to show Tanjiro's purity throughout this whole episode with his persistence to Gyu, and to show that yes, he's just an innocent boy trying to help, but he's also in a way guilt-tripping Gyu into the training. Sakurai then kind of backed up Hanai and explained that yes, Tanjiro had absolutely no intention toward Gyu at all. He was just trying to genuinely help Gyu into this training, help him through all of the past trauma that he's had, to help him just move forward based on Tanjiro's kindness and kind of this camaraderie between these two characters. And Gyu is in this really kind of complicated situation, yet he still trusts and accepts Tanjiro enough to join in and help out with extra training. They asked them to talk more about Gyu's past pain and how that's maybe affecting him to where he's at currently with whether he's going to train or not. Hanai was explaining how at this point in the story, that of course is when we are getting Gyu's backstory, so that the audience will love and appreciate Gyu so much more because they understand everything that he's been through. Sakurai kind of echoed Hanai-san in this and kind of explained that everything for Gyu moving forward is going to be a lot easier because the Gyu that we now have is kind of like the real Gyu. He's gotten through a lot based on his conversation with Tanjiro and remembering painful things from the past, and he's growing past it. It was at this point that it became even more exciting. The voice of Gyu and Tanjiro actually got to perform a live reading of their characters at the front of the stage. So they both came around the table that they had been sitting at and got to live perform kind of part of the scene where Tanjiro and Gyu were standing on the bridge toward the end of Gyu's episode. And if you remember the scene, a lot of it is Tanjiro's inner monologue of him trying to understand where Gyu is at, and then it's a little bit of Gyu's past with Sabito, and a lot of the hardcore emotions of Gyu yelling and crying, and then of course he's hit with the realization of like, oh my gosh, and he remembers Sabito when he slapped him across the face. And so they did this whole scene. This part was so cool because they actually played the scene behind them, and I had a hard time because like I wanted to watch the scene, but every time I watched the scene I like forgot that the voice actors were standing in front of me because it sounds so much like the characters. Now, obviously, I feel ridiculous saying that because obviously they are the characters, but the amount of just raw emotion and the pitch and their tone that they use, the high and the low, when Sakurai started screaming and crying, the audience actually was like, whoa, like there was just this echo throughout the audience of like, oh my gosh, like that's his just voice right now. And all of the inflections that Hanai-san was using, just absolutely incredible. Like I was just so transfixed on the beautifulness of their voice acting. After this whole performance, Yuma-san was like, how much should I pay them? And the audience was like, everything. And Yuma was like, yeah, you're right. There's just not enough money to pay them. They're just such good voice actors, which I thought was so sweet. And of course, Sakurai-san and Hanai-san were probably so thankful to hear that from, you know, kind of the sensei above them. Yuma then talked about how during this scene where it's Tanjiro really helping Gyu, and he's the one who's kind of raising his voice and giving him this speech, he pulled a lot from the very first episode in Cruelty, where it was the opposite. It was Gyu raising his voice and shouting at Tanjiro to kind of get his life together. Now, you know, flash 2 years later, it's Tanjiro kind of telling Gyu this same thing in a different perspective with a different theme here. But he pulled kind of these themes of, you know, Gyu telling Tanjiro how to live his life. Now it's Tanjiro telling Gyu how to live his life, and obviously both in such kind ways that are trying to just help each other, but it's only creating this bond between these two characters to grow so much more. And he was talking about how he obviously relates a lot of that to Sensei Gotoge, and that juxtaposition of both of their journeys paralleling so much with each other, that we saw that in episode 1, and then we see the flip of that now. And it's just such a beautiful connection to have between Tanjiro and Giyu. They then explain that Tanjiro is now moving through the Hashira training, and on the big screen they showed images of every single Hashira from the Hashira training. So I'm sorry, but there was no Rengoku, which was sad because my boyfriend was cosplaying Rengoku. I was cosplaying Muitsura, by the way. I'll pop up pictures of myself at the panel. Oh my gosh, for every Hashira that popped up on the screen, the audience would just applause like crazy and shout, and it was like everyone was shouting obviously for all the Hashira, but like extra so for their favorite Hashira. So I have never heard so many applause for Sanemi in my life. Obviously, I don't like go to Demon Slayer panels that are this huge like all the time. Like I go once a year at Anime Expo, or like when I went to the Demon Slayer World Tour red carpet premiere last year. But like, oh my gosh, there was a lot of Sanemi fans, and I was kind of scared. I was like, dang, like he's got a big audience here, and I'm happy for that man. He's not my favorite Hashira, but go Sanemi. They then moved into kind of talking about the experience that Tanjiro had with all of the Hashira, and kind of this theme of what were the Hashira and Tanjiro able to kind of learn from each other. So then they kind of started to talk about that. Hanai really quickly wanted to talk about how hard the training looked and how proud of Tanjiro he was, and how he just wanted to take a moment to applaud Tanjiro for the effort that he put into passing this training, which I thought was so cute. He talked a lot about how it was really interesting seeing how each of the Hashira's intentions were so different throughout each of the trainings, but they're all for the same goal in the end of just training for this strength and this power, this willpower to continue fighting. Sakurai first started talking about Tengen. Of course, he was the first one to have the training, and he talked about how yes, you need muscles and you need to be strong to fight, but what actually matters is your heart. And this is when he talked about Rengoku, so huge applaud to Sakurai for recalling back to Rengoku, because of course we know that Rengoku is still such an integral part of this story. And he just talked about how even though Rengoku wasn't physically in the Hashira training, there was still some presence of Rengoku throughout it all, which I completely agree. The audience was so happy to hear this as well. Yuma's response mainly was actually a question for the audience, and this was really fun. He was like, I have a question for the audience, which is how he started like every question he had for the audience, because he had so many throughout the whole panel. But he was like, who is everyone's favorite Hashira? On the count of 3, I want you to yell your favorite. So as you can imagine, like the audience just went absolutely insane, and it was just screaming for like a minute. So of course I'm yelling Muitsuro, he's my favorite Hashira, that's who I was cosplaying. My boyfriend's yelling Rengoku. I think the 2 Hashira that I heard the most of were Giyu and Rengoku, which made me really happy. And of course Sakurai also was so happy to hear that Giyu was people's top favorite. And once it kind of died down, the applause and the cheers from the audience, he said, "Thank you so much." In English, and like, oh my gosh, like everyone was screaming and just going wild. It was so cute. I just absolutely lose it when the Japanese voice actors start talking in English. I mean, it's the same like if we were to talk in Japanese, like it just sounds like so different to them, and so I love it so much. We then moved into something, again, exciting. We got to talk more about Inosuke and Zenitsu and how we are finally getting them back on the screen. Now, however, we are getting to see a very different side of Zenitsu, and they asked Hanae-san kind of what it was like working with Shimono, which is the voice of Zenitsu. Hanae-san was explaining how Zenitsu didn't really get a lot of appearance time this season, and so when Shimono-san was in the recording, he was just giving it all his energy, which of course we can see very clearly with Zenitsu on screen. We then got something very exciting, something very similar to what we got last year at the Demon Slayer panel, but we actually got a voice call message that was pre-recorded from the voice of Zenitsu, Hiro Shimono, if I'm saying that correctly. Now, I've never seen Shimono-san in person. He's definitely one that I would love to see in the future. He seems like such an energetic and just happy person. He is also the voice of Dabi from My Hero Academia, so like, you know, there's also that. He plays Connie in Attack on Titan. He plays so many characters. Anyway, we got to see a little video of him talking on this big screen, and he was just talking about how excited he was to come back as Zenitsu, even if it was for just a short while, and how, yes, we are seeing Zenitsu in a very different light than we ever have before. He's very serious. There's something happening that he's holding very close to his heart that maybe has been disrupted, and he's excited to kind of see Zenitsu's ultimate goal in the future, when of course everyone's ultimate goal is to fight and kill Muzan. He of course had to do some of his voice impressions of Zenitsu, so of course we got our iconic Nezuko-chan and everything like that. And he was talking about how he wants everyone from AX to bring him a present. So Hanae-san and everyone else on the stage to bring him a present. He was like, what should they bring me? And it was just really sweet. And he's getting all like close to the camera and then like backing off. And then he has just so much energy. I love that man. But that was a really sweet extra message they added in there for the audience. So thank you so much for that. They asked Hanae and Sakurai-san what they thought of the message. Hanae-san's first impression was he was very noisy, which yes, he was. That made the audience laugh. And then he talked about how we've seen so many different frames and angles of Zenitsu's character throughout the season, and so he's excited to see more, and he knows that Shimono-san is also very excited to see Zenitsu's growth from here. Sakurai was kind of talking about how the present that they will bring back to Shimono is all of the audience's cheering and love for the Demon Slayer story, which I thought was so sweet. Like, that's so like simple, but like beautiful, and I love that. Then moved into showing a portion of the iconic Infinity Castle scene from the last episode of Hashira Training. So of course the iconic face-off to Muzan at the end, Gyomei and Tanjiro realizing, oh my gosh, that's actually Muzan, everyone jumping and everyone falling. Now, we didn't get to see this whole scene play out, which of course the audience was very displeased about. They were like, no, show more. The amount of cheering was just absolutely insane, and I was living it. They asked each of the people on the stage what they thought of this whole scene. Hanae got to explain first that it just made him want to cry because of how beautiful the Infinity Castle was in a very eerie way. Sakurai said he actually got goosebumps listening to the audience's cheers and emotions kind of fluctuate when watching this scene live in this audience, which again is just so cool that they get to experience that and they think that that is a really treasured moment. Yuma-san was explaining how his crew had been working on this final scene for like the past year to make this explosion and to make this whole scene with Muzan and the Hashira as close to perfect as possible. And again, just such a lovely thing to say, but he said he super appreciates hearing the audience's cheers for how much we love this and how he's gonna bring that back to Japan and tell all of his crew how appreciative we are of their work, which just makes me so happy. And we should just be so thankful that they have this crew that is being treated so well, and they have all this time to work on it from what it seems like, and they have someone as great as Yuma-san to bring back all of these compliments essentially for these people's art. Again, they then move on to another incredible thing. We get another voice message, and this one is from the voice actor of Muzan Kibitsuji himself, Toshihiko Seke, if I am saying that correctly. I hope I am. But the video recording on the big screen started off with this man, and he's just holding something in front of his face. And he's talking like Muzan, and the audience is like, oh, this like sense of dread comes upon everyone. And of course he's like, I'm Muzan, I'm gonna take down everyone, blah, blah, blah. And then he like took down this covering and he's like, hi, my name is Seki-san, and I'm the voice of Muzan. And he just seemed like such this sweet man, this like pure soul. And everyone's like turning to each other and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is like the most feared demon, Muzan. Like this man is so kind-hearted, like he's so nice. He announced again that we are getting the trilogy for the Infinity Castle arc in this movie format that will be released in theaters, and how excited he is for that. He also talked about how he's heard and seen a lot of American cosplay, which I thought was really cool for a voice actor to kind of hone in on and talk about, because that's not something I feel like they've mentioned a ton before. It's usually like our applause for their story, not much about acknowledging our cosplay and like our cosplay of these characters that we love and have so much passion for. And so he was talking about how much he loved that and how he hopes to see more representation for the demons. Now, I went absolutely insane, because if you know me, I love demons. Rui is like my favorite character in Demon Slayer. Yushiro is my second favorite. Akaza is my third. Moichiro is my fourth. He's a Slayer. Fifth is Tamayo. So like 4 out of 5 of those are demons. I have so much sympathy and empathy for these demons. I could go on, my head could explode. I could go Kagaya on you, but Kagaya is also up there. My top like 6 characters. He's like number 6. But oh my gosh, like that made me so happy. Of course, like the one time I'm cosplaying a Slayer though, I'm cosplaying Moichiro, and I'm like, dang, last year I was cosplaying Akaza. But anyway, I loved that, and he kind of made this joke, or he kind of made it serious actually, but he was like, I want to see Yuma Takahashi cosplay Nezuko next year at Anime Expo. So that got the audience super riled up. We were like, yes, let's see him cosplay Nezuko, and it was funny. But anyway, that was just so cool seeing the voice of Muzan. I'd never really like actually seen him as a person before, and so seeing him and then just the normal side of his just normal cheery self was just really cool to see. They then moved into showing the kind of sneak peek trailer for the Infinity Castle, which of course we've already seen. This is the visual that we got when the last episode of the Hashira training came out. We got to see that on the big screen, nothing new there, but it was really cool just seeing it on the big screen and talking more about the theater announcement. And then they moved into asking the voice actors and Yuma-san kind of what their thoughts are about that. Hanae-san went first, and he was talking about how everything has really come full circle. We are finally getting basically the big bad of this story, Muzan, and he is going to push Tanjiro as his character to do his absolute best in the battle to come. And he said that as a fan himself, he is rooting for Tanjiro, and he's super excited to see the battles that we have yet to come between the Hashira and the demons within the Infinity Castle, which yes, I am so excited to see more of as well, since I have read the manga. Sakurai was explaining how the voice of Muzan is just so fitting for the role, and he brings such a scary vibe and energy to Muzan's demon character, but there's also this beauty behind it. He then was talking more about the Infinity Castle and how Demon Slayer, of course, is known for having very high visuals, and so he's excited to see that continue throughout the Infinity Castle, which of course he already said at the beginning of the panel how beautiful the Infinity Castle looked. Even Hane-san said it made him want to cry because of how beautiful the animation was. Yuma-san also touched on Seki-san's voice of Muzan and how thankful he is to have him on the voice acting team. He said that his voice holds a lot of power and strength, and it's interwoven with a lot of that kind of eerie creepiness that Sakurai had just been explaining. He brought up the whole cosplaying Nezuko comment that Seki-san had talked about, and he was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And then there was a pause, and he was like, well, maybe. And then the audience went absolutely wild, and then I think at that moment he realized, I messed up. I'm probably gonna have to like follow through with this or like do something close next year, because he was like, oh dang, the audience just heard me like question myself. So Yuma-san, we are hoping to see you cosplay Nezuko at Anime Expo 2025. Again, he wanted to bring forward his respect to Gotoge sensei and talk about how they're the original artist of this whole Demon Slayer story, and yes, Ufotable took over, and yes, him and his crew have taken over, but they're still respecting it and letting their sensei be a part of it to the fullest, adding in things that they want to add and trying to make it as close to perfect and beautiful as possible for the audience, which they know loves it so much. And again, he wanted to tell the audience how much he appreciates how passionate we as an audience get for Demon Slayer, and how he feels that it's his job to continue that cycle of having people to be so excited for his story and Gotoge's original work, which again is just so beautiful. And I love how that's kind of his initial goal, is to continue through that. They then started to wrap up the panel, sadly, and they talk about if you want to have more Demon Slayer content, to check out the new video game that is actually now already released on multiple devices, Steam, the Switch, many other things. It's called Sweep the Floor for Demon Slayer. They played a trailer for it, and they had Hane-san actually talking about it, since he plays video games and he does kind of vlog type stuff on his YouTube channel for video games. They were talking about how they actually got to participate in playing the game at Anime Expo itself, and actually one of my friends got to see that happen a little bit before the panel. All of my friends were in the panel room already waiting, like literally all day. We just sat there so that we would get like the front-ish row seats, but one of my friends came later and they actually got to witness Hane-san in the entertainment hall or wherever they were playing the game. So that was really cool probably for them. But they just talked about how kind of hooked they were with the game, how it's really easy to play and it's good for playing with your friends, and how it's a nice easy game that really hooks you and kind of makes you devoted into your characters and the story. So feel free to check that out if you're interested. I'm probably going to check it out myself, since I have liked the Hinokami Chronicles video game for Demon Slayer that came out a couple of years ago. It was at this time that we had to say our final goodbyes, and they let the two voice actors and Yuma-san give their final remarks for the Demon Slayer panel. Yuma-san went first, and of course he thanked the crowd for being there, putting their time and effort into coming, and how popular Demon Slayer has become in not only America but just the whole world, and how appreciative and thankful he is for that. And he said he's going to continue to do his best with his crew and make the movies so special for us, especially since they are coming to theaters. And he was like, "You're gonna go see them in theaters, right?" And the whole audience just went wild, and that was it for him. Sakurai went next, and he talked a lot about how just mind blown he was that how many people showed up for this Demon Slayer panel. Like literally the whole audience was full, like thousands of seats were full. He was just talking about how thankful he was that everyone came. And then he said something that like made me tear up. You know, in Demon Slayer, Gyu is a character that is continually hated on by so many characters. Everyone says they hate him. But in this audience, Gyu is no longer hated and he feels so much love. And oh my gosh, the audience went wild. I know I've said that word so many times, but like, oh my gosh, people love Gyu. I was screaming. Obviously, I love Gyu with like all my heart, but like, oh my gosh, when he said that, he knew what he was doing because everyone went insane. And then of course he had to end it with another tearjerker. He was like, you know, Gyu has gone through so much and I would really appreciate it if you continue to cheer him on through this next arc. And obviously knowing what's to come, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're making me cry again, buddy. Like, I love you. Hanai-san, of course, closed out the panel. He, of course, thanked everyone for coming and how he is going to take all of the energy that was in the audience and put that into Tanjiro's character in the upcoming movies and the upcoming Tanjiro in the Demon Slayer story, which was super cool. He hopes that we will see Demon Slayer in theaters and that we are just as excited as he and the rest of the cast are to be expressing this story to the world. And of course, he just thanked us all again and said his goodbyes in English. And then to end out the panel, we got a big group picture, which I'll put up on the screen. I'll post a little image of where me and my friends were at. And he closed out the panel by saying his very last line of the Infinity Castle, which was that he's gonna defeat Muzan Kibitsuji. So that, of course, riled up the audience even more. At just this audience, as you can imagine, if you were not there, was absolutely insane and wild. Like, but it was so fun, so passionate. I wouldn't trade it. Like, being there leaves my heart with like such a happy feeling to be a part of this whole group and like family of people that just appreciate and put their whole heart and love into this story that is Demon Slayer. And so I just wanted to say thank you to Anime Expo and Japan and Gotoge, everyone who is involved in making Demon Slayer possible and having these Japanese people come out and share their side of the story and their love of the story to America. So that was the panel. I know I blabbed on and on, but I think this is a very detailed explanation of how the panel went down. I hope you enjoyed. I put a lot of time and effort into trying to remember all of the details as best as I could without having any obviously video proof. There's not even videos out there of the panel to my knowledge. And so I hope that you enjoyed living through this panel and living through this Demon Slayer story that was expressed at Anime Expo through me. I have another video about the MHA panel, so I hope you check out that if you're an MHA fan. I kind of shed a little tears in that video due to the voice actors that were at that panel, so feel free to check that out even if you just want to see me in an emotional wreck. So there's that, but I hope you enjoyed and I will see you in other videos. Let me know if you have any questions or comments and I will see you next time. Bye!